I'm Jessa. I'm 31, and my mother faked my death to cash in on $1 million life insurance policy. I found out when I read my own obituary, then learned she was getting married the next month. If you've ever been through something like this, comment below and subscribe. You're not alone. IT was a Wednesday. Late afternoon. I was in my apartment in Prague, half dressed in leggings and a hoodie, hair in a messy bun, drinking coffee that had gone cold. I remember that because I burned my tongue reheating it. Everything about that day felt slightly off, like a glitch in the simulation. You know those days? Nothing catastrophic, just a weird pressure in your chest, like something's coming. I had 2 Zoom meetings, one with a Finnish developer who kept muting himself mid-sentence, and another with a client in Berlin who wanted more sexy buttons on their homepage. I rolled my eyes and nodded through both. Just another day working remote in Eastern Europe, building apps for people I'd never meet, living a life half in reality and half in code. Then my phone started blowing up to AT first. I thought it was a glitch. 3 emails. 5. 10. Then a Facebook notification. Then WhatsApp. All people I hadn't heard from in years. The subject lines hit like hammers. OMG, Jessa? Tell me this isn't true. Are you okay? I clicked on the first one from an old college roommate. Attached was a link to the Springfield Journal back in Ohio. My hometown's crusty little paper that hadn't updated its logo since the early 2000s. The headline hit me like a punch to the throat. Obituary. Jessica Lynn Carmichael. 31. I stared at it. Read it again. Blinked. My vision tunneled. The room around me started to tilt. There was my name. My face. A photo from my college graduation, me in that hideous green dress I wore once and regretted forever. And under it, a paragraph of lies. Jessica passed away peacefully in her home last Thursday after a brief illness. She is remembered lovingly by her mother, Elaine Carmichael, who survives her, and by a close circle of family and friends. I read it again. Passed away peacefully. Brief illness. Survived by her mother. No. I dropped the phone. Literally. It hit the wooden floor with a sickening clack, and I just stood there staring at it like it had turned into a bomb. I hadn't spoken to my mother in almost 5 years. Not since the last fight, the one where she said I was a selfish, ungrateful brat for leaving the country and not settling down like a normal woman. That fight ended with her screaming, "Don't bother coming back. You're dead to me." I guess she meant it. I sat down, picked the phone back up with shaking hands, and clicked the funeral home link in the article. Some tiny place I remembered driving by when I was a teenager. I called the number without thinking. A soft-voiced man answered. Springfield Rest Chapel. This is Mike. Hi, this is going to sound insane, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I think there's been a mistake. There's an obituary for me online. And I'm not dead. Silence. Then a slow, cautious voice. Jessica Carmichael? I almost dropped the phone again. Yes. Another pause. Ma'am, someone did arrange services in that name. It was a closed casket memorial. No autopsy. Just a death certificate provided by the family. Very private. My heart stopped. When was this? Last Saturday. I hung up. I started pacing my tiny living room, my legs numb. This wasn't a joke. Someone had filed paperwork, bought a death certificate, paid for a service. Who the hell did that? Only one person made sense. Elaine my mother, the woman who told me 5 years ago I was dead to her. She didn't just say it. She made it real. At first, I thought maybe it was an identity theft thing, or a really sick prank. But as the hours passed, the pieces started clicking together. I called the life insurance company, something I hadn't thought about in years. My mother took out a policy on me when I was 16. She told me it was just in case. I didn't know the amount. I didn't even know it still existed, but apparently it did. After bouncing through a half-dozen representatives, I got someone on the phone. I told them I was trying to verify information about a policy issued to Elaine Carmichael for Jessica Carmichael. The woman on the other end went quiet. I'm sorry, but we can't discuss policy details with non-account holders. Can you just tell me if a claim was filed? I'm sorry, ma'am. I really can't. I'm Jessica Carmichael. The claim was on me. I'm alive. Do you understand? I'm not dead. Another long pause. I need to transfer you to our legal department. I didn't get much after that, just a bunch of vague, "we're looking into it" responses. But the tone in their voice said everything. Something was wrong. Something big.my mother faked my death. Filed the paperwork. Got the money, but why now? Then came the kicker. A message from my cousin Lucy. Jessa, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I thought you were just being dramatic or going off the grid. Then I heard about the wedding and I stopped reading. The wedding, I messaged her immediately. What wedding? Lucy replied almost instantly. Your mom's getting married. In 3 weeks. To some rich guy. She's been flaunting the ring all over Facebook. I figured you weren't going to show, but now I'm freaking out. I opened Facebook for the first time in months. My old account had been untouched since 2020, but I knew exactly where to look. Elaine Carmichael. New profile photo. New last name pending. There she was. Smiling. Smug. Wearing a blindingly large engagement ring. Posed beside a man I didn't recognize. Thomas Whitmore, the caption read. My future husband and best friend. I clicked his name. Real estate. Widower. Retired early. Multimillionaire. I felt sick. She was starting a new life. Rich. Happy. And she'd made sure her daughter wouldn't be around to question it. To ruin it. Dead daughters don't object. Dead daughters don't expose life insurance fraud. Dead daughters don't show up to weddings. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. And I sure as hell wasn't staying quiet. I made one phone call to my friend Anya. The only person in Prague who knew the full story about my family. Anya, I said, my voice shaking, how do you feel about helping me crash a wedding? She didn't even hesitate. Tell me when. I wish I could say I was surprised. Shocked. But if I'm being honest, this felt like the final chapter of a story that started a long time ago. My mother didn't just wake up one day and decide to fake my death. This was a slow burn. Years of manipulation, of silence, of tiny cuts that eventually bled me dry. Elaine Carmichael, my mother, was the kind of woman who could turn an apology into a guilt trip. Who smiled sweetly while twisting the knife. She played the grieving widow for 20 years after my dad died, but even when he was alive, she was the one calling the shots. My dad, Mark, died in a car accident when I was 11. He was on his way home from work, got hit by a drunk driver. The kind of tragedy you hear about on the evening news, except when it's your dad, it doesn't feel like news, it feels like the world collapsed. After that, everything changed. Elaine stopped pretending to be warm. She hardened overnight. Not in a survivor way, more like she shed her skin and became something colder. Efficient. Cruel in quiet, invisible ways. She'd tell people how proud she was of me, but never to my face. She'd host fake sales for the PDA and then come home and slam the cupboards because I left a sock on the floor. And she had this way of looking at me like I was an inconvenience. A reminder of something she didn't want to remember. I tried, God, I tried, to be what she wanted. I got good grades. I never snuck out. I skipped every rebellious phase in the book because I thought if I could just be perfect, she'd love me the way she used to, but love wasn't something she gave. It was something she measured. And no matter what I did, I never measured up. By the time I hit high school, she barely spoke to me unless it was to criticize. She liked to say she was teaching me independence, but really, she just withdrew. I paid for my first car with tips from busing tables. I applied to colleges on my own. I packed up and left for university without so much as a goodbye hugged. I still remember that day, pulling out of the driveway with all my crap stuffed into a beat-up Honda Civic. I looked back through the rearview mirror and saw her standing on the porch. She didn't wave. Just sipped her coffee like I was the mailman driving away. I got into Ohio State on a partial scholarship. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I studied graphic design, discovered coding, and finally felt like I was becoming someone. Not the scared little girl she used to pick apart, but a real adult, capable of building something meaningful. I didn't expect much from her during those years. I knew better. But I called on holidays. I sent cards. I even visited on Thanksgiving when I could afford it. She'd greet me with her cold-cheeked air kiss, ask condescending questions about my classes, and then brag about me to her bridge club like she'd raised me with loving hands. It wasn't until I started dating Evan that things got really strange. Evan was my first serious boyfriend. Older, sweet, a little nerdy, but in a way that made you feel safe. He worked in IT and used to leave me dumb little notes in my lunchbox when I had long days on campus. It was the first time I felt genuinely loved by someone who didn't want to fix or shrink me. I brought him home for Christmas during my senior year. That was the first time I saw it, that look in my mother's eyes. Not disgust. Not judgment. Something else. Appraisal. She dressed too nicely that week. Wore perfume she hadn't touched in years. Laughed a little too loud at Evan's jokes. It was subtle, but unmistakable. She even cornered him in the kitchen one night when I was in the shower. I found out because Evan told me. He said she asked if he ever got tired of girls who didn't know what they wanted. I confronted her. I said, "What the hell was that, Mom?" She just smiled, sipped her wine, and said I was only talking. If he's worth keeping, a little flirtation won't scare him off. I didn't bring Evan back after that. When I moved to Chicago for my first real job, I stopped calling. I needed space. I needed to breathe. She sent texts occasionally, "Hope you're well," or just checking in, but I ignored most of them. I didn't have the energy to explain boundaries to a woman who saw them as personal insults. Then came the big blowout. It was 5 years ago at my cousin's wedding. I was back in Springfield for 48 hours, wearing a borrowed dress, trying to avoid her. She made a toast at the rehearsal dinner and used it to make a jab at me, something about not everyone needing a man to be happy. I wasn't even dating anyone at the time. I snapped. In front of the whole table, I told her to shut the hell up. I said, "You know what, Mom? I'm done. Done playing nice. Done pretending you didn't screw me up." She stood there blinking, wine glass in hand, smiling like she wasn't the least bit affected. And then she leaned close and whispered, "If you don't want to be part of this family, don't come back." And I didn't. I moved to Prague 6 months later. Took a leap. Started over. And I didn't hear from her again. Until the obituary. Until she made me officially dead. The funny thing is, I don't think she did it just for the money. Oh, I'm sure the $1 million payout was nice. But I think it was more than that. I think she wanted control. Total, absolute erasure. A dead daughter can't talk back. Can't air dirty laundry. Can't ruin the picture-perfect life she was building with husband number 3. And that's the thing about my mother. She's always been obsessed with appearances. Keeping up with the Whitmores, the Bloomfields, the fancy garden parties with their crustless sandwiches and bullshit small talk, and now she was marrying into real money. Not Springfield dentist money, actual wealth. Thomas Whitmore had retired at 57 after selling his real estate firm for a sum that probably required legal disclaimers. A nice man, by all accounts. Widowed twice, no kids. Liked fishing and red wine and classical piano. She found her golden ticket, and she didn't want me there to ruin the fantasy. But here's the problem. I don't do quiet revenge. I don't do polite ghosts. If she wanted me dead, she should have buried me deeper, because now I was coming back. Not just to haunt her, but to burn down the whole damn facade. I booked my flight that night. Prague to Chicago. One way. Anya helped me pack. "You sure about this?" she asked, folding a hoodie into my suitcase. "No," I said. "But I can't let her get away with it." Anya paused. "You want to tell the police?" "I mean, faking a death insurance fraud. This is serious." I shook my head. "Not yet. If I go legal now, she'll just spin it. Say I was unstable. Say I ran away. I need proof. I need them to see me, really see me, before she can bury the truth again." "You're going to show up at her wedding?" "Oh yeah. Anya stared at me, then smirked. That's insane. It's poetic. And honestly, it was the first time I'd felt anything close to power in years. By the time I landed in Chicago, the weather was cold enough to hurt. It was late March, that miserable in-between season where winter refuses to let go. The airport was crowded, loud, and too bright. I hadn't slept on the flight. My hands were shaking, my stomach sour from recycled air and anxiety. As soon as I stepped off the plane, I pulled up the wedding website. Yes, my mother had a wedding website. ElaineAnnThomasForever.com. Tastefully done. Elegant white background, cursive font, engagement photos taken at a vineyard. The whole thing made me want to vomit. Join us for a beautiful spring ceremony at the Whitmore Estate, April 6th. That was in 5 days. I checked into a cheap hotel outside of Springfield. Nothing fancy. Just clean sheets and a door that locked. I didn't want to risk showing up at any place my mother might know. She still had contacts everywhere. Women from her church group. Her hairdresser. Springfield wasn't a big town. If someone spotted me, word would spread. I needed time to figure out how far she'd gone. How much of my life she'd erased. The next day, I put on a hat and sunglasses like I was in a spy movie and walked into the local library. It was quiet, mostly retirees browsing magazines and moms chasing toddlers around the children's section. I sat at a corner computer and pulled up the public death records. She'd really filed one. Jessica Lynn Carmichael. Died February 29th. Cause of death: myocardial infarction. Heart attack. There was no autopsy. Just a physician's name I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. She'd gone through the state. Filed a fraudulent death certificate. That took planning. Connections. It wasn't just a lie, it was a systematic cover-up, and it didn't stop there. The next link I found was the obituary, the same one that had sent me spiraling back in Prague. The image burned into my mind, my smiling face next to a paragraph of curated fiction. The memorial service had been held at Hartwell's Chapel, a small funeral home on the east side. Closed casket. Per the deceased's wishes. That line alone sent a chill through me. Whose wishes? Mine. I never imagined someone writing fiction about my death. Saying I wanted a quiet ceremony. That I'd wanted to be remembered privately. And people believed it. I checked the guest book. Over a dozen signatures. Names I recognized. Distant cousins. Old neighbors. My high school chemistry teacher. All of them thinking they were saying goodbye to me. No one had asked questions. Of course they hadn't. My mother had spent years laying the groundwork. I was the daughter who went abroad, who never called, who chose a different life. She probably told them I had some rare illness. Played the grieving mother, stoic and brave. God, I could see her doing it, wearing black, dabbing her eyes, standing by an empty casket, whispering, "She's at peace now." I leaned back in the library chair, my lungs burning. This wasn't just betrayal. This was annihilation. She wanted me gone so badly, she'd created an entire narrative. And worse? She collected on it. I made my way to the county courthouse that afternoon, hands sweating in my coat pockets. It took some convincing, but I managed to get a copy of the probate filing. The court had accepted her death certificate as valid. My assets, what little I had back home, were now in her control. A checking account. Some old bonds from my dad. A few things I hadn't thought about in years. But she'd kept track. She waited for the right moment. Then she killed me. On paper, and while I was still catching my breath from that horror, I got the final blow. An email from an old friend. Gwen. Subject line. This can't be true, right? Inside, a screenshot of a Facebook post from one of Elaine's friends. A candid photo of my mother, mid-laugh, holding a champagne glass. Caption: Elaine deserves all the happiness after losing her daughter. So glad she found love again. Underneath, a comment from a woman named Clara. That life insurance payout couldn't have come at a better time. New chapter, new beginnings. Ring sparkles. I sat in the back seat of my rental car, phone clenched in my palm, trying not to scream. She didn't even hide it. She celebrated it. She used my death, my faked death, as a stepping stone. A sob story to soften the edges of her social climbing. Elaine Carmichael, brave widow, grieving mother, resilient bride. I could almost hear her voice. We've suffered so much. It's time for joy again. She didn't care who she stepped on to get there. Not even me. I had to take a break. Parked in some grocery store lot, I sat for an hour, staring at the steering wheel, chewing on the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. How do you come back from that? How do you tell the world you're alive when they've already mourned you? It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about truth, about reclaiming my name, because she hadn't just stolen money, she'd stolen my existence, and I was going to take it back. 3 days before the wedding. I made my first move. I dressed in all black, pulled a hoodie over my head, and waited until the sun went down. Then I drove out to the funeral home. I needed answers. The place was closed, but I knocked anyway. After a few minutes, a man opened the door. Late 50s, thick glasses, looked like someone's grandpa. "Can I help you?" he asked, clearly annoyed. "I'm looking for information about a service you held here last month." "For Jessica Carmichael." He blinked. "That's confidential." "I am Jessica Carmichael," I said. His face turned ghost white. He let me in without another word. Inside, the funeral home smelled like roses and dust. The man, his name was Hank, led me to a small office and closed the door. "I didn't know," he said immediately. "Your mother provided everything. She had the death certificate, the hospital records. It looked official." "Did anyone actually see the body?" He hesitated. "No," he admitted. "She said you didn't want an open casket. Claimed you'd been ill. She even cried. Said you were embarrassed about how you looked." Of course she did. She used my lifelong insecurity as her alibi. I pressed further. "Do you still have the documents she provided?" He nodded slowly. "They're on file. I shouldn't give them to you without a court order, but considering the circumstances," he pulled out a manila folder. Inside, copies of everything. The fake death certificate, falsified hospital discharge paperwork, a doctor's signature I didn't recognize, a medical facility that didn't exist. I stared at it all, rage building in my chest like a hurricane. This wasn't just a fraud. It was a conspiracy. She had created an entire paper trail of lies. Forged signatures. Fabricated a diagnosis. I flipped through every page, burning the details into my memory. When I looked up, Hank's hands were shaking. "I could go to jail for this," he muttered. "I had no idea." "You won't," I said. "But she might." I made copies, took photos, backed them up to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I walked out into the night air and let the cold hit my face like a slap. I felt clear, focused. She thought I was gone, but I was going to walk into her wedding and prove otherwise. Not just to her, but to everyone. To Tio, the man she was marrying. To the guests she'd lied to the town that believed her. And when I did, I wasn't going to scream or cry. I was going to smile, because nothing would ruin her new beginning like the ghost she thought she'd buried, walking through the doors, very much alive, the day before the wedding. I drove to the Whitmore estate, not up to the house. Just the edge of the long, winding drive, where the manicured trees lined up like soldiers guarding a secret. I sat in the car, engine idling, and stared at the iron gates. They were open. White tents were visible in the distance. Laughter, faint and muffled, drifted from somewhere deeper on the property. Rehearsal dinner, the calm before the performance. I imagined her laughing, sipping wine, rehearsing vows she didn't mean, reapplying her lipstick between fake tears and fraudulent stories about her resilience. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. This was real. I was really here. I was really doing this, and for the first time since landing in Chicago, I felt something that terrified me more than anger. Doubt. What if this backfired? What if no one believed me? I'd been gone for years. Changed my number. Disappeared. Sure, the truth was on my side, but lies are always louder when spoken in a confident voice. And Elaine? She didn't just lie. She performed. She would cry. Say I was unstable. That I'd run off years ago and had finally snapped. That she'd tried to find me. That she'd grieved me. God, she'd probably squeeze out tears while clutching her new husband's hand. I thought she was dead. She'd whisper. I pictured the guests, their mouths hanging open, turning toward me with suspicion. Why now? Why ruin her mother's wedding? I could already hear the whispers, crazy, unhinged, jealous. That last one would sting the most. Because no matter how much I distanced myself, there was still a part of me deep, buried, that wanted her to be proud. To love me. To say you matter. Even now, even after this, I turned off the card. I wasn't going to the wedding as a rect. I was going as a witness. I drove back to the hotel, pulled out the documents Hank had given me, and started organizing my proof. I labeled everything, scanned it into folders. I uploaded it all into 3 backup drives, emailed them to myself, and then wrote a simple message that I planned to print and hand to Thomas Whitmore, the man who was marrying the woman who declared me legally dead. It read, Mr. Whitmore, you're marrying a woman who lied about her daughter's death to collect $1.20 million. That daughter is me. Here is the proof. I didn't add drama. No threats. Just facts. I made 4 copies. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, the hum of the cheap air conditioner buzzing in my ears like static. My body was exhausted, but my brain was wide awake. I thought about my dad, Mark Carmichael. He used to say, don't let anyone narrate your life for you. You write your own damn story. He died before he could see what she'd become. I wonder what he'd say now, knowing she'd turned his daughter into a corpse on paper. Probably nothing. Probably just squeeze my hand and tell me I wasn't crazy, that I was strong, that I deserved better. The next morning, I got dressed slowly. Black slacks. A burgundy blouse. Simple, elegant, nothing flashy. I pulled my hair back in a low bun and dabbed a little concealer under my eyes. I looked like someone going to a job interview or a court hearing, not a ghost, not a daughter risen from the dead, just someone with something to say. I got to the estate just before noon. The ceremony was scheduled for 1 o'clock. Guests were already arriving, parking on the long gravel path that snaked through the property. Valets in matching vests ushered people to and from rental vans. White folding chairs were arranged in rows across the lawn. Rose petals scattered in neat little piles. Elaine had spared no expense, but of course she hadn't. When you steal $1 million, you can afford rose petals. I waited in the car until the crowd had thickened. Then I grabbed my folder, straightened my shoulders, and started walking. The moment my shoes hit the gravel, everything slowed down. I passed a woman with a tray of champagne flutes, a photographer snapping candids, an elderly man adjusting his tie while smiling at the woman beside him, and no one noticed me at first, until I got closer. A voice whispered behind me, "Oh my God." Another, louder. "Is that Jessa?" I kept walking, eyes turned, heads tilted. A small cluster of people fell silent as I passed, their champagne flutes halfway to their mouths. I made my way toward the arch where the ceremony would take place. White drapery, roses, a string quartet playing soft music in the distance. Then I saw her daughter Elaine, my mother. She was standing near the front, holding a clipboard, directing someone about flower placement. Her hair was pinned up. Her dress was pale gray, elegant, and expensive. She looked younger somehow. Lighter, she turned, saw me, and froze. The color drained from her face so fast, I thought she might actually faint. I didn't stop. I walked right up to her and said quietly, "Hey, Mom. You look great for someone who buried her daughter last month." She didn't speak. Her eyes darted around. She was calculating, assessing who was watching, trying to decide if this was a dream or a nightmare. I pulled out one of the folders and handed it to her. "Here's your paperwork back. Thought you might want to revise your eulogy." Still no words, just breathing. Heavy, uneven. People were whispering now. If a ripple moved through the crowd, Elaine reached out and grabbed my wrist. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and sharp. "Coming back to life," I said. She shook her head. "You can't be here. You left." I'm not dead, I said loudly enough for the people nearby to hear. And you lied to collect insurance money. I have proof. You might want to tell Thomas before I do. That was when she cracked, her eyes narrowed. Her voice dropped even lower. You don't know what you're doing. You're ruining everything. I laughed. I'm not ruining anything. You already did that. Behind us, I saw Thomas Whitmore walking over. Mid-60s, tall, tan, silver hair. His brow furrowed in concern. Elaine, he asked, is everything all right? She tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. Thomas, this is just some misunderstanding. He looked at me. I'm sorry, and you are? I handed him the second folder. Jessica Carmichael. Her daughter. Not dead. He opened the folder, his face slowly transforming from confusion to shock to something harder. Disbelief. Then quiet horror. Elaine's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. Thomas, I can explain. He held up his hand. Not here. Not now. He turned and walked away with the folder, heading inside the house. Elaine stood there trembling. You don't know what you've done, she whispered. Yes, I said. I do. I walked away, not looking back. The ceremony never happened. The chairs stayed empty. The string quartet packed up early. And the expensive buffet, flown in from Chicago and decorated with edible gold leaf, went untouched. I heard the shrimp started curling in the heat around 3 p.m. A symbolic flourish, really. Everything she built around this perfect lie began to rot, but I didn't stay to watch the full collapse. I left the estate after handing Thomas the folder, taking the long way back to my car through a side path lined with lilac trees. I could feel eyes burning holes into my back. Whispers swirled behind me like wind. That's Jessa, but she's supposed to be. I thought she died? No, she's right there. My name, one my own mother had tried to bury, was in the air again. No longer a myth. No longer a ghost. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse into my seat. I didn't scream or punch the steering wheel like I thought I might. I just sat there with my hands in my lap, staring out at the trees as the first petals of spring dropped like confetti. I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. I just felt visible again. Alive. That night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Jessica. It was Thomas Whitmore. His voice was calm, controlled. I could tell he'd had practice hiding emotion. A man used to boardrooms and legal negotiations. But under the even tone, I heard something else. Wreckage? Yes, I said, my voice steady. I read everything you gave me. Twice. Silence. Then, would you be willing to meet? I didn't say yes right away. I let the pause stretch. He didn't fill it with pressure or platitudes. Finally, I said, if it's in public. Of course, he replied. There's a coffee shop downtown. Cedar and Elm. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Fine. We hung up. I stared at my reflection in the hotel mirror for a long time after that. I didn't know what he wanted. Closure? Answers? Or maybe he wanted to confirm I was really breathing, really human. That the woman who'd faked my death was the same one he nearly married. Either way, I owed myself that conversation. The next morning, I got there early to IT was one of those sleek, upscale cafes with matte black menus and overpriced lattes. I wore the same blouse from the wedding, not out of laziness, but as a statement. I wanted him to see me as I was when the lie unraveled. Thomas arrived right on time. Crisp white shirt. Navy blazer. No tie. He spotted me, approached slowly. Measured. Like I was a wild animal he wasn't sure wouldn't bite. May I? He asked, gesturing to the seat across from me. I nodded. He sat down, placed his phone on the table, and folded his hands in front of him. I don't even know where to begin, he said. Start anywhere, I replied. I'm used to confusion. He gave a hollow laugh. I believed her, you know. Every story. Every tear. She told me you died in Prague. That you'd been sick for months. That she'd flown out to be with you in your final days. My stomach turned. She said it was peaceful, he continued. That your last words were about how proud you were of her. That you hoped she'd find love again. The audacity of it made my teeth clench. She told you that? I asked. He nodded, his face hardening. She even had a quote printed in the wedding program. My daughter wanted me to smile again. I couldn't speak. The disgust on his face matched mine. I keep thinking, he said slowly, about how many people she lied to. About how I almost married someone who looked me in the eyes and told me her child had died, and I comforted her. I swallowed. She's very convincing. He looked at me. I don't think I really knew her at all. I studied his face. The lines around his eyes. The way his mouth twitched when he spoke. Why did you call me? I asked finally. He paused. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he said. For believing her. For not knowing. For not asking more questions. He leaned forward, and I wanted you to know she's going to pay for this. I stiffened. He saw it? I mean legally, he added. I've already contacted my attorneys. This kind of fraud, it's not just unethical. It's criminal. You're going to press charges? His jaw flexed. I'm going to make sure the insurance company does. They've been alerted. I sent them your documents. Good. We sat in silence for a while, the buzz of espresso machines filling the space between us. She said you were unstable. He said suddenly. I rolled my eyes. Of course she did. She said you'd run away. That you were always difficult. I looked him straight in the eye. Difficult is code for inconvenient. For not playing along. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry I didn't get to know you before all this, he said. I didn't respond. After a moment, he stood. Pulled out a business card, if you ever need anything. Even just someone to confirm your story. I took the card, slipped it into my bag without looking. He hesitated. She fooled me, he said softly. But she doesn't get to keep fooling the world. And then he left. That afternoon, the police showed up at my hotel. 2 officers. Polite but firm. Miss Carmichael, we'd like to ask you some questions. I'm not the criminal, I told them. They nodded. We're aware. They wanted to know everything. When I left the country. When I last spoke to my mother. When I found out she'd declared me dead. I gave them copies of the documents. Showed them the email trail. Even pulled up the obituary. They took it all seriously. That surprised me. Maybe it was Thomas. Maybe it was the fact that I wasn't some teenage runaway. Maybe it was just the absurdity of the whole thing, but they believed me, and more importantly, they believed in a case. The fallout was fast. 2 days later, Elaine was arrested. Fraud. Forgery. Filing false legal documents. Insurance fraud. IT made the local paper. Socialite bride arrested for faking daughter's death. My phone buzzed all day with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Is this real? Are you okay? What the hell, Jessa? Even Gwen sent me a voice note that just said, I always knew she was off. But this? Damn. I didn't respond to most of them. I didn't want their shock. I didn't want their sympathy. I wanted their silence. Because where were they when I disappeared? Where were they when she said I was dead? If no one checked then, why should I entertain their concern now? Elaine posted bail the next morning. I knew she would. She always lands on her feet, if not with grace, then at least with money, but the mask had slipped. People were talking, whispers had become headlines, and for the first time in my life, her lies weren't enough. She couldn't spin her way out of this. Not this time. I took a walk that night. Just through the park behind the hotel. The air smelled like grass and dirt and new beginnings. I sat on a bench and watched kids ride bikes, couples argue quietly, dogs sniffing everything like it was their first day on Earth. I didn't have a plan yet, not for what came next. I had no job, no apartment, just a suitcase and a laptop and a passport full of stamps. But I had something else too, power, not the kind you flaunt. The kind you feel. I had faced her. I had pulled back the curtain, and I hadn't flinched. She tried to erase me, turn me into a story she could cry about, and I turned myself back into a person. Now it was her turn to disappear. A week passed. Then too, spring crept in with slow confidence, warm winds, budding trees. That faint scent of soil and sun that always makes you think something new is coming. But in Springfield, it wasn't a new beginning. Not for Elaine. IT was unraveling, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. The morning after her arrest, she reemerged from her house like a disgraced movie star, sunglasses too big, coat pulled tight, lips pressed in that tight line she always wore when she couldn't control the narrative. Cameras were parked across the street. A local reporter shouted, "Miss Carmichael, do you have anything to say to your daughter?" She didn't answer. Of course she didn't. That would have required acknowledging I was alive. I watched the clip online. It had been picked up by a national outlet. Not front-page news, but salacious enough to ride the midweek clickbait wave. The headline made my chest tighten. Mother arrested for faking daughter's death to collect insurance payout. There it was. My name. Her name. Our whole mess of a history laid out for the internet like a courtroom drama. Except it wasn't drama. It was my life, and now the world finally saw her for what she was. But the part that surprised me most, the silence from her no phone call. No threats. No panicked voicemails or fake apologies. No lawyers trying to smooth things over. Nothing. She vanished behind her front door. I'd expected war. What I got was her retreat, until Thomas called again. "Can we meet?" he asked. "Why?" I replied. "You already said sorry." He hesitated. "This isn't about apologies. I think you should know what's happening. She's unraveling." I agreed to meet him. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see what unraveling looked like when it came to Elaine Carmichael. We sat at the same cafe. This time, I got there late on purpose. When I walked in, he was already waiting, 2 cups of coffee on the table. He looked tired. Older, somehow. Like the last 10 days had wrung him out. He slid a manila envelope across the table. "Her lawyer sent this to me. Said Elaine wanted to clarify some things." I raised an eyebrow. "She's talking through intermediaries now?" "She won't speak to me directly," he said. "Apparently I betrayed her." I snorted. "Because you didn't support her fraud?" She said I humiliated her. Of course she did. That was Elaine's greatest wound, being seen for who she really was. I opened the envelope. Inside were 5 typed pages. No letterhead. No signature. Just a document titled, "Timeline of Events. Jessica Carmichael." I scanned the first paragraph and felt bile rise in my throat. She was building a defense, a narrative. It detailed my emotional instability. Referenced fake doctors, claimed I'd been in and out of hospitals overseas, that I'd cut off contact voluntarily, and that she'd been advised by international authorities to settle my affairs in absentia. Thomas watched me read. His eyes didn't move from my face. "She's preparing for court," I said. He nodded. "She's trying to make me look crazy." "Yes." I closed the folder. "You believe any of it?" He shook his head slowly. "No. But I know how this works. She's not trying to win outright. She's trying to create doubt. Confusion. Enough to muddy the waters so the prosecution hesitates." It made sense. Elaine didn't need to be innocent, she just needed things to be complicated. The insurance company filed a civil suit 2 days later. It was quiet, no press release, no big announcement. But I saw the docket entry. They were coming for the money. And if she couldn't prove I was actually dead, that money would come back, with penalties. I smiled when I saw it. That was $1.2 million she'd used to buy jewelry, private chefs, a new car, and a wedding dress. And now it was a liability. I walked past her house one afternoon. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to see the curtains twitch. Maybe I wanted her to see me, but when I got there, the place looked deserted. No cars in the drive. Windows dark. Lawn untrimmed. The roses she used to obsessively manicure were wilting, browning at the edges. She was hiding. The mighty Elaine, Queen of Springfield, prisoner in her own faux French colonial mansion. I didn't linger. I just walked past like she was any other neighbor. Like she was nothing. Then the threat started. An email from a burner account. "You're making a mistake. This won't end well." Then another. "You ruined her life. Hope it was worth it." I didn't reply, but I kept every message. Screenshotted the headers. Sent them to the detective assigned to her case. I wasn't stupid. I'd dealt with Elaine's manipulation my whole life. But this was something new. Desperation. She was spiraling, and I wasn't going to give her anything to grab onto. A week later, I got a call from Lucy, my cousin. The same one who'd first messaged me about the wedding. I just left Grandma's, she said. Elaine showed up. My stomach turned. What? She just walked in, unannounced. Sat down like nothing happened. Said she wanted to clear the air. I closed my eyes. Jesus. She's spinning, Lucy continued. Said you're emotionally disturbed. Said this is all some vendetta because she didn't give you everything you wanted. I laughed bitterly. Everything I wanted? I wanted her to not fake my death. She's scared, Lucy said. You can tell. Her voice was shaking. She looked awful. Good, she asked about you. Where you were staying. What your next move was. I tensed. Did you tell her? Of course not. Lucy paused. Jessa, she's not just lying anymore. She's unraveling. And she's dangerous now. You need to be careful. I nodded. Even though she couldn't see me, I am, I said. I've been careful my whole life. That's how she got away with it. Not anymore. I filed a restraining order the next day. Preemptive? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. IT wasn't just about safety. IT was about control, taking it back. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to her chaos. I was setting the terms. I gave the court all the burner emails, the documents, the witness statements. The clerk didn't blink. She'd seen worse. But she did say one thing before I left. You'd be surprised how many people it takes years to realize their parent isn't a parent. Just a person. A broken one. I nodded. I already knew. The final message came the night before Elaine's preliminary hearing. No email. No letter. A voicemail. Blocked numbered. I almost deleted it without listening. But curiosity is a powerful thing. I hit play. Her voice was shaky. Breathy. The kind of tone she used when she wanted to sound wounded. Jessica. I don't know what to say anymore. You've turned everyone against me. You're punishing me. I made mistakes, but I did it for you. For us. You don't understand the pressure. The loneliness. You abandoned me. I closed my eyes. There it was. The core of it. The twist. The weapon. You abandoned me. Not I faked your death. Not I stole from you. Just her endless, hungry need to be the victim. The message continued. You were always difficult. So sensitive. So dramatic. But I loved you. I did. And now look what you've done. Beep. End of message. That I didn't save it. I didn't need to. I'd heard it 1,000 times in 1,000 ways. That voice, dripping with entitlement and self-pity, but I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. Because I wasn't a scared girl anymore. I was the woman who exposed her, and she knew it. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I always pictured trials in those big, echoing rooms like you see on TV. High ceilings, wood paneling, a dramatic gavel slam. But this was just a clean beige room with worn carpet, bad lighting, and a few too many folding chairs. Real justice doesn't always come dressed in theatrics. IT was Elaine's preliminary hearing, not the full trial, just the first major stop on the road. A judge would decide whether there was enough evidence for the case to proceed. Just the phrase enough evidence made my stomach twist, because if what she did to me wasn't enough, I didn't know what was. I arrived early. Sat in the back, hoodie pulled up, sunglasses in my lap. My presence wasn't required today. I wasn't a witness yet, not officially. But I needed to see it. To feel it. Elaine walked in 20 minutes late. She was dressed to perform. A slate gray pantsuit. Pearl earrings. A neat chignon. It was classic Elaine, calculated modesty. Just enough class to look put together. Just enough restraint to whisper victim without saying a word. But her eyes betrayed her. They were darting. Restless. She kept fidgeting with her bracelet. When the bailiff called her name, her mouth tightened like she was swallowing glass. Her lawyer, some slick-talking, overly tanned man who looked like he belonged in a billboard commercial, whispered something in her ear. She nodded stiffly. Then the judge walked in. She was a woman, maybe early 50s, with a no-nonsense air that made the room sit up a little straighter. I liked her immediately. Ms. Carmichael, she began, You stand accused of insurance fraud, falsifying public documents, and obstruction of justice. Today's purpose is to determine whether this matter will proceed to trial." Elaine's lawyer stood, smiled like he'd just won a golf tournament. "Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate that there was no malicious intent. Simply a tragic misunderstanding stemming from years of estrangement between my client and her daughter." He paused for dramatic effect. My client truly believed her daughter was no longer living. I clenched my fists under the bench. She believed I was dead. She threw a fake funeral, filed a forged death certificate, lied to insurance companies, hid a payout. That wasn't belief. That was strategy. The judge didn't blink. "You'll have an opportunity to present your argument. But first, the prosecution may proceed." The ADA was a woman named Carla. Mid-40s, sharp voice, clear eyes. She stood, flipped open a folder, and began. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate beyond a shadow of doubt that the defendant knowingly falsified documents, including a forged death certificate and medical records from a non-existent hospital. We have testimony from the funeral director, statements from the insurance investigator," and she looked around the room, "and, most critically, we have a living, breathing victim." My pulse jumped. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Is the alleged victim present in court today?" Carla turned slightly and gestured toward me. "She is, Your Honor." The entire room turned. Elaine turned. Her eyes landed on me, and she froze. You know that feeling when someone sees a ghost? It was like that because in her mind, I was a ghost. She'd killed me off, buried me in paper and lies. And now here I was, in a battered hoodie, eyes locked on hers, not going anywhere. The judge nodded. "Noted." Elaine's lawyer scrambled. "Objection to the characterization of victim noted." The judge said again, not even looking at him. Carla continued, unshaken. "The victim, Jessica Carmichael, is not only alive, but has provided irrefutable evidence that her mother declared her legally dead in order to collect over $1 million in life insurance. The documents contain forged signatures, fictitious institutions, and, per our forensic analysis, were printed on a home office printer." A murmur rippled through the room. Elaine's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, these are serious allegations. We request that the court acknowledge the emotional strain and psychological trauma my client has endured due to her daughter's long-term absence." Carla turned toward him, calm but cutting. "Miss Carmichael moved overseas, yes. But she was never missing. She filed taxes, paid rent, used social media, had active communication with friends. Her whereabouts were traceable by any interested party, including her mother." The judge leaned forward slightly. "Miss Carmichael, do you have anything you wish to say?" Elaine stood slowly. For a second, I thought she might actually admit it, tell the truth, but of course she didn't. "Your Honor," she said, voice quivering just enough to sound sincere. I truly believed my daughter was gone. She hadn't spoken to me in years. I thought she'd died overseas. I was grieving. I was scared. And I made poor choices. But I didn't mean to deceive anyone. I didn't mean to commit a crime." She even dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I could almost feel the old part of me, teenage Jessa, desperate for any scrap of affection, wanting to believe her, but I knew better now. The judge nodded. "That will be considered." She turned to the attorneys. "I've reviewed the preliminary evidence and found it sufficient to proceed to trial." Elaine flinched. "Bail remains posted. Trial date to be scheduled within 30 days. The gavel fell, and just like that, it was official that we were going to trial. Elaine Carmichael would finally face consequences not just from me, but from the LAWAS people filed out. I stayed seated. Elaine turned one more time. Our eyes met, and I didn't look away. Not this time. She was the one who turned. Outside the courthouse, I stood on the steps, blinking into the gray afternoon light. Thomas found me. "You okay?" he asked it. I shrugged. "Define okay." He smiled. "Alive. Brave. Unstoppable." I laughed despite myself. I never thought it would go this far, I admitted. You didn't take it this far, he said. She did. We stood there in silence for a moment, watching people scatter back to their lives. I'm going back to the city tonight, I said. Got a friend there with a spare room. And I think I've had enough of Springfield. He nodded. Probably wise. We shook hands, and that was it, an dramatic goodbye. No promises. Just two people who both lost something and learned something. Two people who weren't going to be fooled again. That night, I packed my bag. Everything fit. I'd kept life small these past few years. I left the hotel key at the desk, paid my tab in cash, and walked out into the cool night air. Before I left town, I made one last stop. Not at Elaine's house. Not at the courthouse. But at the cemetery. My name wasn't on any stone. There hadn't been a real grave, but I found the plot anyway. A small patch of lawn under a maple tree. The fake service had been held there. The funeral home director told me they'd scattered rose petals and placed a photo on a stand. There was nothing left now, just grass and wind. I stood there for a long time. Then I bent down, placed a single wildflower on the earth, and whispered, "You tried to bury me." But I didn't stay gone. And I walked away. I didn't watch the trial in person. I'd spent years watching her, studying her, reading her moves like a tired script. I didn't need to see the performance again. This time, it was her turn to sit in the hot seat while other people who didn't grow up under her roof or walk on eggshells through her moods, judged her for once. But I got updates. Carla, the ADA, was efficient like clockwork. She sent me summaries after every major day of testimony. I read them in bed, one after the other, each message a slow kind of relief. Funeral director confirmed her story changed multiple times. Insurance rep testified she insisted on expedited payout, cited urgent deaths. Forgery expert confirmed signatures were traced. Each message was like a stitch being pulled tight in a long, unraveling seam. The trial lasted 4 days. Elaine didn't take the stand. Her lawyer tried to paint a picture of confusion, of a mother who had simply given up hope, who feared the worst, and acted out of desperation. He said I'd gone off the grid, that I was a difficult daughter, that I'd always had emotional issues. I'm sure he said those words like they were facts. Like they were justifiable explanations for inventing a death certificate and forging hospital records. But truth has a way of crawling out, even when it's buried under layers of charm and manipulation, especially when it's wrapped in documents and witnesses and the undeniable presence of the woman who was supposed to be dead. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Elaine was found guilty on all counts: insurance fraud, falsifying public documents, obstruction, and a handful of lesser charges related to identity theft and mail fraud. Her face, they said, was unreadable when the verdict was read. I'd seen that face before, stone still, eyes blank like she was somewhere else, watching it all happen from the rafters of her own ruin stage. Sentencing was set for 30 days later. The prosecution pushed for prison time, 18 months minimum. White-collar crimes don't always stick, but the judge was known for being tough. Especially when the lies hurt real people. Elaine's lawyer fought for probation, claimed she was fragile, that she'd suffered enough. The irony of that, hearing Elaine described as fragile, would have made me laugh if it didn't make my stomach twist, because when someone like her is called fragile, it's not about weakness. It's about control. She could cry on cue, make strangers pity her, make judges hesitate. She'd been doing it her whole life. This time, though, it didn't work. She was sentenced to 16 months in prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. A hefty fine, mandatory mental health evaluations. No one clapped, no one gasped. The courtroom was silent because Elaine Carmichael, my mother, the woman who faked my death, was officially a convicted felon. I didn't celebrate. I didn't open champagne or dance around the room or scream into a pillow like I thought I would. I sat quietly in the apartment my friend Anya had let me crash in for a month, sipping tea and staring out at the Chicago skyline. I thought I'd feel vindicated. What I felt instead was tired, not disappointed, just empty. Because revenge doesn't refill the parts of you that were starved. Justice doesn't hand you back the years you spent questioning yourself. There's no retroactive peace. What it gives you is space, and I needed space. Space to figure out what I actually wanted. Now that I wasn't fighting ghosts, a week after sentencing, I got a letter in the mailed, NO return address. Just a cream-colored envelope with my name written in that unmistakable cursive. Sharp, looping strokes. Expensive stationery. Of course, Elaine never did anything without drama. I stared at it for a long time. I almost threw it away. Almost tore it in half without opening it, but something made me read it was short. Only 3 sentences. Jessica, I hope one day you understand why I did what I did. I never stopped loving you. Mother. That was no apology, no confession. Just more control disguised as sentiment. I read it once, then fed it through the shredder until it was a pile of confetti. She didn't deserve space in my mind. Not anymore. The insurance company filed a separate civil suit against her estate. They froze her accounts, repossessed the Lexus, put a lien on her house. Everything she'd built, every artificial luxury stacked on my name, started to collapse. Neighbors whispered. The country club revoked her membership. Charity boards quietly erased her from their rosters. She wasn't infamous. Just embarrassing. A woman whose name now came with too many footnotes. Springfield has a long memory. But it also has short patience. No one wanted her story around. They erased her. Fitting, I guess. It's what she tried to do to me. And me, I stayed gone. I didn't return to Prague. That life had served its purpose, an escape hatch from the inferno. But I wasn't hiding anymore. I moved to Chicago full-time. Got a studio apartment with creaky floors and big windows. Took a job with a local nonprofit doing UX design for mental health apps. IT wasn't flashy, but it felt honest. Anya helped me furnish the place. We built a bookshelf from a kit that took 3 hours longer than it should have and laughed until our stomachs hurt when the shelves collapsed the first time we stacked books. IT was the first time I'd felt joy in months, not adrenaline. Not survival. Joy. A few weeks later, I got another message, this time not from Elaine. It was from my Aunt Marianne, her younger sister. We hadn't spoken in years. Her message was simple. I believe you. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. If you ever want to talk, I'd love to. I didn't respond right away, but I saved the message because not all bridges need to be burned. Some just need time. Summer came. I planted a tiny balcony garden. Bought a second-hand bike. Spent mornings at the corner cafe reading books I'd never had time for. Some days I'd wake up and forget, for a few seconds, that I was the girl who rose from her own grave. That I was the daughter erased and resurrected, and those days, they were the best, because I didn't want to be defined by what she did to me. I wanted to be more than the scandal, more than the punchline, more than the story. But one morning, I got a message from a podcast producer. She wanted to interview me, said the story had gone viral in survivor circles, that people were inspired by my courage, that my name was being passed around in forums about narcissistic parents and familial betrayal and reclaiming your identity. Your voice matters, she wrote. And that caught me, because for so long, my voice didn't. Elaine had silenced it, redefined it, told her version so loud and so long that mine got buried under it, but now people wanted to hear me. I said yes, and when the interview aired, my inbox filled with messages, people who'd been disowned, cut off, lied about, people who were told they were crazy, dramatic, ungrateful, difficult, people like me, and every message felt like another hand reaching out from the fog, saying, "You're not alone." I printed one and stuck it on my wall. Thank you for not staying silent. Elaine started her sentence in September. Minimum security, but still prison. They let her bring books, photos, soft things. I'm sure she spun her own version of the truth to the women around her. She always had a talent for that. I didn't visit, didn't write, didn't ask, because forgiveness isn't always a door you need to walk through. Sometimes it's a lock you stop trying to pick. And I'd already walked far enough. It's been 11 months since Elaine Carmichael was sentenced. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like a life someone else lived, like I read it in a book and shelved it away, unfinished. I still get asked about ITBY reporters, podcast hosts, occasionally by strangers who send me messages that start with, "You don't know me." But most are kind. Some are curious. A few want to debate the definition of forgiveness, as if I owe the world some poetic reunion with a woman who turned my existence into a transaction. I don't respond to those, because here's the truth. Not every story ends in reconciliation. Not every wound heals clean. And not every mother loves the way a mother should. Some burn, some bury, some rewrite history and tell the world you're dead, so they can start over without you. I don't wish her pain. I don't wish her redemption either. I don't wish her anything. She doesn't live in my head anymore. She doesn't get to. The apartment I live in now is small, but it's mine. My name is on the lease. My art is on the walls. There's a crooked lamp by the window and a stubborn radiator that clicks in winter. But it's quiet, peaceful, unpretentious. No drama, no illusions, no curated perfection for neighbors to admire. My mother would have hated it. Which makes me love it even more. I hung one thing by the front door, a single framed photo. It's not of Elaine. It's not even of me. It's a screenshot of my own obituary. The one she wrote. It hangs there like a ghost, not to haunt, but to remind, because I need to remember where I've been. I need to remember who I almost let define me, and every time I pass it, I feel something powerful settle in my chest. Not grief, not rage, just the quiet knowledge that I survived. I kept seeing a therapist, Dr. Gwyn, a calm, straight-talking woman with warm eyes and zero patience for bullshit. She doesn't use words like narcissist or borderline unless she has to. She focuses on boundaries, language, recovery. You don't need to understand her to heal from her, she told me once. You just need to understand what she took and choose not to let her keep it. That stuck with me because Elaine took ALOT voice to my confidence, my sense of safety, but what she wanted to take was bigger, my future, my named, my ability to stand up and say, "This is who I am." And she failed, because I'm still here, and I know who I am now. I spoke at a conference this past month. Not about fraud or criminal trials, but about digital identity. How we build it. How we lose it. How we take it back. The irony wasn't lost on me. A woman who was legally declared dead, now lecturing about how we define ourselves online. But when I told the story, condensed, factual, stripped of its edges, the crowd went still. You could hear breathing. Someone in the front row started crying halfway through. I finished with the one sentence that's followed me since the verdict. She didn't destroy me. She just forced me to rebuild. I got a standing ovation. I didn't know what to do with it. I smiled. I nodded. I walked off stage and called, "Anya, you're famous now," she joked. "I'm free now," I replied, and I meant it. Elaine will be out in a few months. Probation, good behavior, all that. I don't care. She can walk out of those gates and try to rebuild her little empire. But she'll never get back what she lost. Not just her freedom, not her reputation, but the role she played in my story, because I took that back. The moment I walked into her wedding alive, that was the moment she lost control, and I've never let her have it again. Not for 1 second. People ask if I'd ever talk to her. If she reached out, really reached out, what would I say? And honestly, nothing. There's nothing left to say. Closure didn't come in a letter or a final scream or some cathartic apology from a prison phone. Closure came in quiet moments, paying rent with my own money, falling asleep without checking for burner emails, laughing so hard I cried with friends who know me. Not the myth, not the family drama, just me, walking into rooms with my head up, choosing who I keep, who I cut, setting boundaries like fences, not walls. Closure came in living. The one thing she never wanted me to do without her permission. I'm still unpacking it all. Not just the case. Not just the trial, but the years before that, the childhood of walking on eggshells, the way my wins were minimized, the way my tears were too loud and my voice was too much and my dreams were inconvenient. Elaine didn't just fake my death. She trained me to fake my life. T.O. smile through silenced. T.O. succeed quietly. T.O. shrink. And I don't do that anymore. I take up space now. Not because I'm loud, but because I don't apologize for existing. I didn't destroy her. She did it to herself. I just stopped playing along. And that was the loudest thing I've ever done.